Aloha, namaste. This is Radha Home, and I'm here with your full moon forecast for this Wednesday, August 30th. Our moon and sun will be directly across from each other, forming the full moon at 3:37 p.m. Hawaii time, which is 6:37 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. And this particular full moon is in a star called Satabishak. Satabishak is the 100 healers. It is a star that's sometimes referred to as a place where if you contract an illness or a disease under this constellation, it will be very difficult to cure or heal. And likewise, if you use a cure or employ a remedy under this constellation, it will have tremendous effects and heal whatever ails you very quickly and permanently. The 100 part of this Sata comes from the many stars that actually make up this particular nakshatra. And they're also said to be the eyes of Varuna, who is the deity of this star. He is the all-encompassing sky. He is the dark sun, so the part of the sun that we don't see when it's nighttime. And as the sun sets in the west and is said to go beneath the ocean, he's often referred to as the god of the oceans. He's married to Varuni, who is his counterpart, and she is the goddess of the oceans. Varuna is really more of the god of the sunset or the west, and he represents the ending of a day, the ending of a cycle, and the part where we have to rest. But while we're resting, his eyes are open and he's seeing what's happening in the dark. And this is a really important quality of this star, because the nakshatras are in the distance behind the 12 zodiac signs that people are more familiar with. He's in, or Satabishak is behind Aquarius, right? So Aquarius is the sign of the future. It's a sign of technology. It's the sign of fairness in society. So trying to topple kingdoms and hierarchies and small one person or small group rule, like monarchies or oligarchies, and create a more dispersed wealth and well-being for all. Aquarius is an air sign, so we're dealing in the intellect and the mind, which is where we form the vision for what we want to see in the future. And Varuna and Satabishak is where we can see what's really wrong, what's really going on in the cloak of night. We are, surrounded by corruption and greed and manipulations, coercion. We're surrounded by, perhaps sort of petty thieves or people who might make a living or live in a world of shadows where everything they do is kind of nefarious, the sort of common criminal that we might think of. But in Satabishak, we can see the bigger criminals, right? Where it's beyond the sort of, burglar in the dark who's stealing from a store, from a house, and it's the actual corruption of the system itself, of the people who hold the power and the people who are the ones who make the decisions for everyone else. And that trickles down to the rest of us. So it's a very powerful star for social change. It's a very powerful star for revolution. And it has this quality underneath it of really shaking things up and creating a different paradigm. Now, of course, because it is an air sign and it's fully in this sign of Aquarius, it's not one of the stars that bridges two different signs. We see that, again, it's sort of living in the realm of the mind, right? It's what we think becomes what we do, but it's not necessarily the action that makes the revolution occur, but it's that thought, that realization, and perhaps that anger that can happen that can turn the tides. In this particular full moon, we have the ruler, we have Saturn joined our moon. And this is going to have a big impact, particularly because he is retrograde and in fairly close degrees. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can see what I'm talking about. So the moon and Saturn are about 4 degrees apart from each other. Whenever Saturn's on the moon in any sign, in any place, there's a bit of a more somber energy, particularly with a full moon. There's this brightness and this engaged quality. When the moon is at its fullest, our mind is at its fullest, our emotions are at our fullest. So we might see some, crazy activity that we often see with full moons. But there's also a liveliness and a socialness to the quality of the moon being more bright. And when Saturn is joined, it can bring some dimming to this light, right? It can bring the awareness, the very realistic awareness of what can go wrong, all the many things that already have gone wrong, how limited time is, that we're all going to die. It can bring up a lot of fears for us. Saturn retrograde is bringing these fears to us in more of an internalized way. So they're not necessarily manifesting on the outside. We're not necessarily actually hesitating out of fear. We're not necessarily actually employing caution out of fear, but inside we might feel riddled with fear or anxiety, particularly in whatever area of life Saturn is ruling for you. And if you don't know that, I do forecasts for all 12 signs weekly and also for these major transits so that you can know what Saturn rules for you, because it's going to be really different what area of your life it affects, whether it's your relationships or your career or your home or your own identity. For people who are Capricorn or Aquarius rising signs, Saturn is themselves. So Saturn being so close to our moon is going to bring a quality of the limitations that there are. We see this future, we see how it can be. Yes, humanity can shift, humanity can change. And at the same time, we know all the things that are stacked against us, or all the reasons why it might not work, or just how powerful those powers that be that are corrupt are, how much they've managed to really take a stronghold in every area of life, and how difficult it is to extract ourselves from a system. We have Sun and Mercury across the way. Of course, the Sun is always across from the moon in a full moon. That is the definition of a full moon. But Mercury is joined the Sun. And so we have this sort of cross drishti between Saturn and the moon and Sun and Mercury. And of course, the Sun is in his own sign of Leo and Saturn's in his own sign of Aquarius. So there's a lot of power where the king is, right? We're also standing in our power and authority. And that's not just going to be actual kings or actual people who hold power, but each one of us is standing in our power through this transit. Particularly people who might normally be more meek can really feel this presence of like embodying their connection to source and embodying whatever leadership thread does run through them. Mercury can bring strong communication when we're in Leo, and can also really have us sharing information as if it's already fact or law, or as if we're already an authority on something. But Mercury is also retrograde now, right? So whenever a planet is retrograde, the energy has this built up quality where it's more internal than it is external. So the thing that planet does, like communication with Mercury, or fear with Saturn, or commitment, it does it internally, and it doesn't manifest as much on the outside plane. So we're not as able to make our communication run in the outer world, but internally we have more of a process of building up our thoughts and all the things we want to say and all the ways we want something to run, but yet we might find ourselves stagnated in the output. Of course, Mercury gets a big rap when he's retrograde, right? It's one of the most popular planets to talk about the retrograde cycle, even though it's a little bit shorter than many of the other retrograde planets. But the reason is because so much of our world and so much of our lives is communication oriented, particularly now that we live in this age of cell phones and computers, and so much of our interactions take place in the digital realm. That buildup and that stall and that delay of information that we might feel within ourselves is happening within these computers, within these devices as well. And we might find that, a message doesn't load, we don't get the message, communication comes late, mail might come late, that we forget something or we're delayed in some way, and it inconveniences us. It creates a lot of inconvenience. But of course, Saturn's been retrograde since June and will continue forward in this way, continue backwards in this way until November. So this is a much bigger chunk of time that we're reckoning with our Saturn being backed up. And as much as the communication delays might cause a lot of annoyance or perhaps arguments in relationships, or even cut contracts in business dealings or other kind of things like this, the effect on our lives is really much more minimal than these outer planets going retrograde for really long cycles of time. And it particularly depends on what, of course, it rules for you. If Mercury is your ruling planet, if you're a Gemini rising or a Virgo rising, you're going to be a lot more affected by Mercury retrograde than perhaps if you are a Taurus or Libra or one of the other planets where it's not as big of a part of your identity. So with these retrograde planets across from each other, what we're seeing is the inner fears that we've been reckoning with Saturn for some time now when Mercury was direct might have caused us some hesitation in speaking and things like that, but might not have, because Mercury wasn't retrograde, right? Saturn, and it was more of an internal thing where we might have felt hesitation about something, but not actually employ that hesitation in the outer world. Well, now that Mercury is also retrograde, it's like there's fear bottling up as well as miscommunication. Maybe you do make an attempt to do whatever it is you're supposed to do and communicate whatever you're supposed to communicate, and it doesn't get heard, it doesn't get listened to correctly, or in time, the timeliness is a factor. And then we create chaos or more fear in our world. Why isn't that person getting back to me? Why did that contract that I was supposed to have not go through? And pretty soon we get into a state where we're living with a lot of anxiety and fear. Satabishak is also ruled by Rahu. And so there is this quality of seeing things magnified and more delusionally, like where we really make a big deal out of something for better or worse, whether we're making something exaggerated at how great it is or exaggerating how not great it is. We're not seeing clearly, and we're obsessing over something more than it might be. So this can also be true of the corruption that we see, or the lies that we think we've been told. And for us who are regular people, we're going to be seeking out this corruption from people we know, or where's the not truth happening, in whatever small circles we might run in, or in our own businesses or jobs that we partake in. We might start calling things out ourselves, or at least internally calling them out, whether or not that manifests in communication or not. So this is a really interesting full moon for us. And of course, many people are talking about it as being a blue moon and a super moon. The super moon is that it's going to be quite large. So it's going to have a lot of light for us to bathe in. And the energy becomes really powerful when the moon is really large like that. The blue moon is more related to the Gregorian calendar. So that's, when there's two full moons in a calendar month, then we call it a blue moon, which isn't particularly special from any kind of cosmological perspective, because in lunar calendar, which many cultures, certainly the Indian culture, participate in, a new moon is the start of a month. A full moon is the apex of the month, and then the next full moon is another month. So you wouldn't really be able to have two full moons in a month, because the month is defined by the moons as opposed to by these arbitrary dates on a calendar, as they are with the Gregorian calendar. So it's more of a phenomena in the Western world that would, is really just trying to bring together, I guess, the Gregorian calendar with the lunar calendar. So we do have Venus still retrograde as well for this full moon, but in a few days, on the 3rd, she is going to go direct, and Jupiter is going to move into retrograde motion. Jupiter, like Saturn, tends to be retrograde for long periods of time. And this is actually a little bit late for his retrograde cycle to start in relationship to our Gregorian calendar. So we're going to find that even when Mercury goes direct again, and even with Venus direct again, while that might clear up some relational things, and it certainly will clear up our capacity to use our devices and communicate clearly, the bigger questions that we have around what we're committed to, what we spend our time on, and with Jupiter, what we believe, what our beliefs are, and what we follow, what wisdom we follow, what teachings we follow, what inspires us. These things are going to be backing up. And of course, just like with Saturn, it's really going to matter what it rules in your chart, because for everybody, it's a different ballgame. It can be your career, it can be your identity, it can be your relationships. But even without that information of your specific rising sign and what 2 houses Jupiter rules for you, you can see that there's this kind of questioning and review that comes up around what it is that you've been following as your path, like what propels you into the choices you make. Because what we believe gives us the choices that we have. Some people have very strong, powerful beliefs, and they go out in the world and they make a career out of that, or they make their entire reputation based on their beliefs. But most people don't realize how much their beliefs impact the choices they make. They don't even realize that those beliefs are there at all. A lot of our beliefs are unconscious. Many of them are rooted in things from childhood, or how we were raised, or cultural biases that we were raised within. And the other rest of them are largely coming from our experiences. And of course, our mind holds on and traps negative experiences more than positive experiences. So we might spend quite a lot of our time with beliefs that are avoiding painful experiences, avoiding things we believe will bring us pain, or we believe will weaken us in some way. And this cycle of retrograde, particularly when you see both Jupiter and Mercury retrograde at the same time, we have an opportunity to use our buddhi, to use our discrimination, our intellect with Mercury, as well as our higher wisdom with Jupiter, to kind of review where our beliefs come from and if they are actually aligned for us. Are these beliefs aligned with our values? Are these beliefs aligned with what's true? And I think that's one of the biggest problems we have in our society right now, is truth is such a nebulous word. People don't have a lot of clarity on what truth is, right? There's one field of thought that is truth is always relative, and your truth is your truth and my truth is my truth. There's another field of thought that truth is this, and it's this, it's the facts, and the facts are truth. And if you deny those, then you're confused, or you're ignorant, or whatever other story we want to say. But truth is, my truth is that neither of those really embody truth, right? Facts are only facts because somebody says they are, right? A fact is a fact only because it's been studied, and many people have agreed upon that, and somehow it's been determined to be fact. But when we look at the way our world is working in this moment, with with information, with science, with all of these different things that bring us to these facts, we can see that there's a lot of corruption on every level. So what's being brought to people as fact is it just, anybody who has any sense of discernment can see that the facts are quite malleable, right? Truth is not malleable, but facts certainly are, and data certainly is. So that can't be truth, right? That can't be the definition of truth. The other thing is that truth can't be so temporal. It can't just be of this time and this place. There can be, that's your truth. That's when the truth becomes that first type of truth that I said, which is your truth is your truth and my truth is my truth, right? In this moment, in this feeling, with this breeze on my skin, with this sun shining or this rain pouring or this hurricane happening, this is what's true now. But it's not, it won't be true in 5 years. It won't be true in 5,000 years, right? Well, the Vedic teachings are based on things that were written down 4,000 years ago by people who were living, embodying truth, and realizing that we were moving into a darker age, a darker time, a more diluted time with more ignorance, and that these things needed to be written down in order for future people to ever grab a hold of the thread of truth again. Many cultures were practicing truth in that golden age, but the people living in India wrote it down. And in writing it down, they declared it's problematic. The writing it down makes it problematic because it is a living and breathing thing, truth. It's not a stagnant fact that's been posted in a book by somebody who says they know. But better to do that and make it a little bit, not as true by doing that than to leave no thread for the future and no way for people to carry forward truth into the future. And so this is an important moment in time to not just recognize all the ways there's corruption around you and all the ways there's confusion and delusion and lies perhaps around you, and to really turn it in and say, what are the ways in which I am deluded? What are my beliefs founded upon that might have been something that happened to you when you were 2 years old and you're not even aware of? Or, this deeply entrenched fear you have that it really, you really don't know why you have it, but you've been operating from a place of avoiding having that experience again and calling that true. Every time you spot anything that sort of triggers that for you, that becomes true. And so rather than shaming ourselves for having those experiences or spending, hours in therapy or whatever the many ways are that we try to navigate this world for ourselves, we have an opportunity right now with all of these retrograde planets to really just sit with ourselves and experience the experience of being in our body, in our being, because that's one truth we can kind of count on, right? Is that, like I was saying, the breeze on your skin, but also the internal process within your body. When you feel suddenly anxious, or and what does that feel like? We call it anxious. We call it anxiety, but what does it feel like in your body? Is it a closing in your throat? Is it, a rumbling in your stomach? Is it a prickling on your skin or prickling on your skin? What does it feel like for you in that moment? Because that is truth. That is your truth that no one can take away from you, that you are sitting there and you're having this experience and this feeling. Once you start attributing it to things, once it's that person's fault I'm having this feeling, or it's that experience's fault that I'm having this feeling, or all experiences like that create this feeling, then we've moved out of the realm of truth, right? Then we've moved back into a realm that is beyond, not beyond truth, but nowhere near it, right? But when we can sit with that presence within ourselves, we can find a truth that is very real. And from there, we have these threads that have been left for us in time, and not just in the Indian culture, particularly native cultures, tribal cultures, indigenous cultures have had practices that have managed to maintain to some degree with their bloodline. There's these threads we can grab onto that point to a truth that is timeless, right? A truth, and I talk about this, I've certainly talked about it before. Truth that stands the test of time. That was true 5,000 years ago. That's true still today, and it doesn't require this specific time, this specific place, and this specific person for it to be true. So when we take our personal truth that does require those things and the timeless truth, and we're able to just feel into the connection between those and really understand in our body why that might be true, then we can really see how aligned we are when we have our beliefs, which so much is founded on. When we move forward into whatever we do with our time, whatever, career paths we're following, whatever circles we're socializing in, whatever, relationships we're in, we can be founded in a place of deep integrity, not just with ourselves, but with the world around us and the cosmos, which is really an important factor that does not have a lot of weight in our current world. A lot of people sort of, poo-poo astrology and these kind of cosmological things in a more entertainment realm. And I certainly understand why, considering the vast majority of what we receive on this plane is coming from very spotty sources, right? There's a ton of different systems and things that people have kind of created in recent years. There's some systems that have much more lineage, such as I Ching or something like that, but people sort of just dabble in all these different practices and they never really go deep in any one. And then we have, of course, the elephant in the room, the Western astrology, which is not accurately accounting for where things are in the sky. So the barometer that people have for truth is, even those who are seeking it, passionately seeking it and trying so hard to be spiritual beings, much of what they're using as the barometer of truth is actually not true. And so then we have a new problem called people are, founding their belief systems and their confirmation biases and the things that they think they know on something that's on very shaky ground and that doesn't hold true in the roots that go deep from ourselves into the earth and that run through time immemorial. And so we end up with a lot of confused people, particularly people who are trying so hard to be on a path and trying so hard to embody spirituality and to bring their beliefs and their values together to create this new world that so many people want to see. It becomes easy to write it off as fluff. It becomes easy for, intellectuals, critics, the media, and people with power and money to put a big X on it and say that's just fluffy entertainment, because mostly it's being presented that way. And the deep spiritual roots of these practices has been very separated from the beings practicing it. And there's a lot of ego and there's a lot of confusion and there's a lot of delusion and a lot of inaccuracy. And the fact that astrology itself is a science is completely ignored. And it should be when it's not being practiced as such, when it's based on beliefs and based on erroneous beliefs, right? Or erroneous facts that have been proven to not be true by many different authorities on the subject. So it's a great time to really evaluate what you believe, why you believe it. Sometimes people will share their beliefs and I'm going to stop the share for a minute just because I've been talking for a long time without referring to the screen, and looking at the chart can get boring. But there are a lot of people who when I ask them why they believe what they believe, or when they're sharing some significant event that they, know is a really big deal, but they don't really know why, I ask them why. Often, why is that significant? Or why is that, what is that belief coming from? And one of the things that's come up a lot in the last 3 years has been people telling me that even if it's not true, even if what they believe is not true, they're kind of okay with that, because they just want to believe in something. And believing in something is better than not believing in anything. It gives them some kind of comfort. And I find this to be the best answer I could possibly receive for the question, because it really answers for me, like, why do people, once I find out something's not true, I'm quick to kind of, move to find what is true, and continue to move in that direction. And of course, you have to have your own discernment about what information you're taking in, and everyone's going to, believe different sources. At least in today's day and age, the sources are going to be varied as to who believes what is true. But when I ask this question, and people, I want to believe in something, it feels better to believe in something. It feels better to believe there's someone coming to rescue us, or it feels better to believe this thing because, it feels right to me, or I can feel that it's right for me, and that's good enough. And I think that's kind of beautiful in a way, right? There's something very beautiful about people just owning their need to feel comfort and connection. And, and if these tools are bringing them those feelings, then great. That's offering them that. But there's a deeper use for these tools also. So when people are ready and they want to move beyond sort of their comfort zone, and just, being given something to kind of, like a little blankie or something to make them feel better, when they want to dive deep and really get into it, the tools are here. Everything we need is here to know more. And it's actually not even like out there, right? It's in here. And so that's the tipping point, that's the place we're at right now. Do you want to continue to kind of give yourself little soft blankies that comfort you for a short time? Or are you ready to do the deep work? Are you ready to really face what's true and dive into that? And, the one thing I didn't talk about that I wanted to just mention was Mars in Virgo. I didn't want to like sit there on that screen for so long, but we do have Mars in Virgo. I am actually going to share it again just really quick, because it's helpful to have the visual. I'm a very visual learner myself. We have Mars in Virgo here. And he's giving a one-way drishti to this Jupiter here in Aries. And this is an irritated Mars, right? If you've been feeling a little extra agitation the past few days, I know Mercury is really easy to blame, and perhaps the communication that went wrong, or the thing that didn't get listened to, was on Mercury, but the anger and irritation is on Mars. And Mars here in Virgo becomes like the ultimate perfectionist, the mom who wants everything to be absolutely perfect, and it's not. The drawer's messy, I just cleaned up that thing and now something else is a mess. The constant chaos and constant re-cleaning and re-purifying that we have to do of our body temples, of our homes, of the environment around us. All of these things can get really irritating because we have this overly fiery drive to organize and clean and purify. It can be a great time for cleaning your house. It can be a great time for taking care of some of those things, maybe doing a fast or a cleanse of your body, because there's more discipline around your health in this time. But it can also be a time to get really irritated really quick when something messes up your perfectly laid plans. And this drishti is on Jupiter in his own sign of Aries, right? So this is already a fiery Jupiter. This is a belief. These are beliefs joined Rahu. It's very far degrees now, so the Rahu influence on Jupiter is much less. But this sort of fired up, I have this belief and this is the thing I'm going to do. And Mars is over there giving the drishti there. And it's not perfect, it's not perfect. There's a sock that fell out of the drawer, and this is like this, and there's a spot over there. So before you can even do anything, it needs to be perfect. And then of course, Jupiter's going to begin retrograde as well. So we that's another thread we need to sort of separate and pull out. And that's one of the reasons why I practice astrology the way I do. And it's how I was taught astrology by my teacher, Sam Jeppy, is because the need to understand that all things are their own running source, and then to integrate them in some way and understand how they're collectively affecting you is important. And it's not just important in astrology, it's important in life. It's important to be an intelligent human, to be able to hold many different truths at the same time and allow them, even if they're conflicting in some way, to sit in the same room. And then find how you can ride all those different things, even if they are not coming together in this really neat, clean synthesis. Because of course that's what we crave, is this really like shiny package with a bow that says this is this and this is that, you know, this is your problem for this amount of time, here's your remedy, go home. We don't really like things that are messy and you know, it can feel overwhelming or confusing. But if you follow each thread to its truth, and particularly if you know your rising sign and you're able to evaluate the houses and what affects you personally the most, then you can really enlighten yourself about yourself and how what your process is and how you work. So that's a really important factor that we're seeing right now come up as well. The fiery Mars, and Jupiter is then returning that one-way drishti to Mercury and the Sun here in Leo, getting us even more sure of our beliefs and the pulpits on which we stand. And, you know, it's an interesting time. A lot of ego can be running right now, a lot of passion, a lot of truth, you know, and a lot of confusion and delusion and lies. And it's really important, more than understanding who else is not living in their truth or what else is not operating in full integrity, is really to check in with ourselves and the ways in which we're doing that. Because any single bit of change that will ever take place in the world that we see outside of our eyes is going to have to start inside ourselves. So I wish you a very blessed full moon. If you would like to be a part of my community online, my Patreon community, where I offer these reports broken down for all 12 rising signs so that you can really see what area of your life is being affected week to week and on the major transits, you can go to the link in the comments, and there's a 1-week free trial. And I also do every few weeks a live discussion with that group. And this week I'm going to do one on retrogrades because we have enough of them. We might as well really dive deep into how each of these different planets operate when they're retrograde and how it affects us in our charts. Again, I always go back. That's the big thing with my group, is I really want to dive into how it's different for each person. Because when we just understand the general astrology and we just understand Saturn retrograde and Venus retrograde, we're really doing ourselves a disservice to truly understand how this has an effect in our own life and what differences and choices that we have in front of us and what choices we can make going forward to heal and bring ourselves back to a place of peace. We need to know where it's happening in our life. We need to understand how it's running. And not that we don't each understand what's wrong in our lives or what's right, but we, you know, when you have such clear, precise accuracy on what is running, it makes such a world of difference from this more nebulous, you know, idea of like sun sign astrology or just the general astrology, particularly if it's not even based in a you know, placements that are actually accurate. So if you would like, you can join that. You are also welcome to always like, share, comment, and help me pass my work further along the path. Namaste. Happy full moon.